Welcome to the Big Bout Podcast. This is John Suntress, and on the line, one of my favorite Chicagoans who knows his pop culture and knows his boxing as well, the great Sal Abbinanti. How you been, buddy?
I'm good, John. How are you? I don't know it the way you do it. The only way I know it is every time I see something, I think I got to ask John.
But, you know, as we were saying on the phone, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is a podcast. Hold on a second. You and I grew up in the early 70s. We were watching Wide World of Sports, or even better,
right.
Do you remember when they would have fights in the middle of the week, Monday or Thursday? Because
you had what they had them at. Did they have them at the amphitheater and they had them at the stadium? But mostly the amphitheater I remember was wrestling.
Oh,
but
sure.
By my house with the Aragon, they had the closed circuit.
Right.
You know, when you had for some of the Ali fights were there, and the super fights. They used to call them the super fights.
That's right.
But you had to hear about it the next day in the paper, you know, because we didn't have cable and all that, and you know, my old man was never really into it that much. But yeah, that was. We started this conversation talking about the Ali HBO thing, and I just remembered how great the '70s were.
Yeah.
The late '60s and '70s, early '70s for boxing.
Well, and I was going
to
go ahead.
No, you had so many guys that were kind of evenly matched, and then one guy would beat the shit out of the other guy, but yet he couldn't hold his own against a different guy. You know, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, styles make fights, as they say.
I'm watching, like Frazier. Everybody loved Frazier, but, you know, I mean, I just couldn't get past Ali after the first one. And then you had, Ken Norton. You had, George Foreman.
Jerry Quarry, for God's sake.
Jerry Quarry. How anybody beat George Foreman is beyond me. But you notice in that, I mean, I don't know if you remember it or not, but in the documentary, you see Ali literally do the interview after the Foreman fight, and he tells the guy how he's going to beat Foreman.
Yep.
You know, where he's like, I just got to lay off of him and let him punch himself, and it's exactly what he did.
Yep.
Because Foreman, my God, you watch him just literally, he's like a tree. Those body shots, but, Ali got into his head. I mean, it's the psychological warfare.
Well, and they both fought and beat the same guys, but whereas Ali, it would take him, a decision, Foreman would plow through them and destroy them.
Well, Ali even said, he said, look, I fought guys that were much stronger than me before, and it's not about who's the stronger fighter.
No.
And it's like I'd never seen that interview because everybody was talking about the rope-a-dope and like he came up with it right then and there, and he had Angelo Dundee loosen the ropes, and I don't know how much of it's urban legend, how much of it actually is real, but when you watch the fight, you see the ropes are loose. I mean, I don't know.
Oh yeah,
looser than they should be.
Well, Dundee always said the humidity in Zaire was literally like affecting the ropes, and he wasn't loosening the ropes. If anything, he was tightening the ropes. Because they had such trouble maintaining, a good taunt stretch and everything. But I was going to say, when I asked you about, do you remember when fights were during the week? Every now and then, because you're right, this is before cable, this is before HBO, or in the very early years of HBO.
Right.
But ABC and NBC and CBS would actually show fights on primetime, especially Ali fights. Like on Monday night or Thursday night. And I remember the Ali Jimmy Young fight was on ABC television live. And it was the whole evening. It was, they had about a half hour, an hour of just kind of talking about both fighters, and then they showed the actual fight. And the fight went to the full 15 and everything.
And what was so great about those fights too was the color. It was real bad.
Oh yeah.
It was real it was just real stark. No mid-tones,
right.
So any primary colors that they were wearing were like, that was it. And that's what I always remembered about the Frazier Madison Square Garden fight, because they reran that thing on Wide World of Sports like every 2 weeks.
Sure.
Is he had those green shorts with the gold trim.
That's right.
And it looked like he was wearing, like something that was a bathrobe because they were so bright. and Ali had the red trunks, but on the cheap colored sets we had, you had to watch it at Sears.
Right.
Because we didn't have a color TV probably until 1979. you literally would stand in Montgomery Ward's, and watch the fight there, in the TV section.
I do.
You'd watch it over at Goldblatt's over on Broadway and Lawrence.
There you go. That's another it's a good Chicago department store, Goldblatt's, exactly. Weebolt's.
Yeah. Well, I forgot about Weebolt's. So you got Weebolt's, but back when the stores had television sections.
Absolutely.
You'd literally just stand there for an hour and a half and watch television because it was in color.
Absolutely. Remember, right next to the TVs was the camera department, and that's where they had the tape recorders. Ooh, high tech. Cassette tape recorders.
No, I remember that. Our beginning, middle, and an end in our life was Sears.
Yes, of course.
You went Sears had everything. Sears on Lawrence.
Yep.
They're making condos out of it now.
Isn't that insane? Yes. And my God.
They used to sell guns. They used to sell guns, rifles, and pistols there at Sears.
It's true. Oh my God.
You could walk in and buy a box of ammunition at Sears.
Right. And then go down and get popcorn or candy corn or
and go down and
corn.
go get corn nuts, or talk to the guy from Mutual of Omaha, for insurance.
Or man, this is a good non-boxing tangent, but it tells you about Sears. Remember they had the art, the Vincent Price art collection, where literally they had like real fine art, and you could put it on your Sears card, your credit card, and put it on layaway. But if you wanted, like, literally a Rembrandt print, you could buy it at Sears.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, they had everything. I mean, they were the one stop everything for, when you were a middle class family. You and then for me it was good because I was a fat kid, so they had the Husky section.
I was right there with you.
Yeah, they called it the Husky section, which was just a nice way of saying, hey, if your kid's fat.
Your kid's fat, exactly.
You get them, yeah, my mom would go, we need the Husky section.
We need a leisure suit and Husky. Absolutely, man.
We need, yeah.
Wait, we were talking...
Every time I see one of those fight things, I was watching a thing with Max Baer, and my wife, because it's good enough because you can Google these guys and they're great old boxing photos, and I said, I got to ask, and sometimes I text you while I'm watching it.
Sure.
And I go, John, what's up with Max Baer? And you're like, oh, devastated.
Yes, for real.
And I'm like, I looked up the pictures and I go, my God, this guy was a prodigy. I mean, it was not even fair how the size of this guy and how well he was built, and
Well, I was telling you off the air, Turner Classic Movies. Usually, there's one. He made a film in the early '30s. And in fact, Bert Sugar and I talked about it on this podcast called The Prize Fighter and the Lady. And he gave me all the details about when Bear made the movie. But usually to accompany that movie, because it's short, to fill the hour or whatever, or half hour, they put in a short subject of him sparring. And I'm telling you, I a lot of times when people compare today's fighters to the old timers and stuff, everyone's like, well, they fought differently or whatever. No, you put Max Baer in today's, with Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury and these guys, and I don't know who wins, but I'll tell you something. They'll remember, just like when the Bears used to have losing records, but they'd make you pay for it on the field. Max Baer would have made you pay for it on the ring. He was quick as hell. Yeah. He was a lefty, devastating power. Mike Tyson style power. And frankly, I wouldn't mind.
Mike Tyson used to talk a lot about Dempsey and about Max Baer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. He was a student of the game.
Dempsey.
Yeah. He was, and he modeled his look after Dempsey. The no robe and the sidewall haircut and all black.
Well, now, let me ask you this. Did they ever play up, because he used to always wear the Star of David insignia on his shorts.
Yes.
Max Baer.
Yes.
Did they ever play up the whole Max Schmeling thing with him, and the way they did with Joe Louis was the fight of the century? Because did they ever play that up or no?
They did. Well, and in fact, I told you I interviewed Max Jr. and again I put that up on the Big Bout podcast. I interviewed him back, like 15 years ago, and he said Max's manager Ansel Hoffman was a Jewish man, and he to honor him he would wear the star. And then there was a great press agent, Irving Rudd. And he used to tell a story to when is Max Baer Jewish or not? And he said, "I'll tell you what." He goes, "It was Yom Kippur weekend," and he goes, "I happened to go to a gym, and Max Baer was in there training." And he said, "Max, what the hell are you doing?" He goes, "I'm training for my next fight." And he said, "What about Yom Kippur?" He said, "I'll fight him next." And that's that's how Irving Rudd knew that Max Baer was not a Jewish man.
Perfect.
So yeah, it's no, he was funny as hell. There's great. I mean, honestly, and that's the point of bringing up the Turner thing, because you know, there's those newsreel kind of highlights of Max's fights, and you might get a sense of his style. If you watch this Turner thing, it's perfectly restored. The speed is right, and you really get a sense of how good Max Baer was, and he was an animal. And I really, you know, seeing that, like I said, I'd love to compare him against even somebody like Deontay Wilder today, who's got devastating power, but I don't know how he does, because Max Baer was able to handle Primo Carnera. Not that Primo had the power, but he was another giant that Max just chopped down and just kept knocking down. And I'd say the deficiencies of today's heavyweights, Max didn't have any of those. I mean, the only thing that kept him from winning was he wouldn't take an opponent seriously, like the Braddock fight.
So, but now Primo was what? He was a wrestler first, wasn't he, or no?
I don't know. He might have, because I know he was kind of a circus strongman before he became a boxer. I know he wrestled after he was an active boxer into the 50s. And even, as you might remember, he's even in one of the early Hercules movies as an opponent, which is pretty funny. Okay. But yeah, no.
I wasn't sure he was the guy that they just put in the ring, you know, because he was a big guy.
Sure.
Or the guy really would hold his own. You know what I mean?
Well, he did learn how to fight, and he could box and everything. He just didn't have a big punch. And again, he was, you know, he was run by the boys, so there were a lot of fixed fights and everything. Bud Schulberg told me he remembered seeing Carnera fight another young heavyweight contender named Young Stribling, and that's the first time he had ever seen Carnera live. And he told me what it was like watching Carnera fight and everything. It's crazy stuff. Now, you know, again, we were in that 70s period, so we had Cosell on ABC. I don't know when Marv Albert started doing NBC fights. I know he did them in the 80s, but I think he was still local New York in the 70s. So I don't remember who the TV guy was doing fights. Maybe it might have been Don Dunphy. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But then and CBS had Tim Ryan and Gil Clancy. And I don't know if you remember any of these announcers and stuff, but beyond Cosell.
Sure.
Okay, there you go.
Wide World of Sports, you know, when you had, you know, it was just like you had, it was almost like it was modern day opera, because you had Frazier, and then Ali was just relentless with the way he used to torment this guy.
Yep.
Frazier with the gorilla, he punched a little toy gorilla.
That's right.
And then you had, Ken Norton, and you had Foreman, and then everybody was just constantly waiting for the rematches of Ali Frazier, but yet, when Foreman came out, you watched the Frazier fight with Foreman, and he just destroyed the guy. I mean, it was like he knocked him down so many times, where he hit him so hard he knocked him off his feet a couple of times.
It was incredible. Absolutely.
I don't know if you remember those shots, but there were ones where we would hit him, and then Ali would Frazier would be like he would jump.
Yep.
You know, he was getting hit so hard.
Absolutely, man. No, Foreman, and that's why it was so amazing when Ali beat Foreman. And God, you know, ESPN Classic did a great compilation afternoon, and you can find it on YouTube, of tons of mostly just studio stuff before and after Ali fights. And they would just kind of quickly go through the highlights of what happened in the fight and then immediately go to a post-fight interview with Cosell and Ali. And the pre-fight talk, and I remember watching this on TV one Saturday on Wide World of Sports, the week before the fight, Cosell's last word before the fight actually happened. And he's just like, I know Ali's a great fighter, I know, but George Foreman, Ali's going to fight him and he's 32 or 33? He's like, does he have enough? Is it possible? The man who destroyed Ken Norton, the man who destroyed George. I mean, and he just like a prosecutor.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Now he did. What did he do to Norton? I forgot about that. It was like they had to stop it right away, didn't they? When he fought Norton.
No, there were 3 fights. They all went the distance. The first fight was only a 12-round fight because both were contenders. It wasn't a championship fight. Norton broke Ali's jaw. And Ali claims...
No, I'm talking about Foreman, when Foreman fought Ken Norton.
Oh, excuse me. That was either... I'm going to look that up. I know it was either a second-round knockout or a third-round knockout. It was right after Frazier. The fracas in Caracas.
If you're watching in the Michael Mann film, Ali's just on his couch watching the Frazier fight like he's prepping for Frazier.
Right.
And he's watching the Foreman fight, and he's like, he couldn't believe it, how Foreman just destroyed him. I mean, it wasn't even a fight. And he's like, well, that changes things. We're in for the whole landscape of the heavyweight division just changed when Foreman. And then there's that documentary about is it the fight that he had with Foreman, where they show you Foreman training, what he's doing to the punching bag, where he just shows that the heavy bag, how he's just literally leaving dents in it every time he punched it.
Watermelon-sized dents. Yeah, that's called When We Were Kings. It's a tremendous documentary.
Yeah, I mean, you're watching it and you're going, my God. Yes. I mean, this guy's going to hit you. I mean, and he did. I mean, that many times those body shots. But Foreman even said he never overcame the Ali fight. Psychologically, he said Ali got into his head so bad that he just never was able to, to come out of it.
The Norton Foreman fight happened March 26, 1974 in Caracas, and they stopped the fight at 2 minutes of the second round because Foreman was destroying him and kept knocking him down. Right. And Norman kept getting back up, but he kept putting him down. And finally, after again, you can see it on YouTube, and it's incredible. And this was the steam engine that Foreman was. And, but just like Tyson and Holyfield wasn't afraid of Tyson. And Ali wasn't afraid of Foreman. And it wasn't, and I wonder how much, especially the role of knockouts that Foreman had against Chuvalo and Frazier and then Norton and stuff.
I never had a lot. I only remember catching a lot at the end of Ken Norton's career. And then I remember even his son, was a football player.
That's right, for the 49ers.
And I never realized what a run he gave Ali. I mean, in both of those fights. I mean, you could argue even who won the second fight because it looked pretty close.
Yeah. The third fight, I think.
Because nobody ever mentions Ken Norton. I mean, you'll hear Michael Spinks. I mean, you'll hear about Leon Spinks beating Ali before you'll hear about Norton beating him.
You're right.
And I never realized he gave him a beating, man, that time when he broke his jaw. And even the second fight, he held his own pretty good.
It was a close fight. But the third fight at Yankee Stadium in '76, that's the one that everyone is like, it was kind of years earlier, Joe Louis against Jersey Joe Walcott, the first time they fought. And everyone's like, Walcott won, and they gave the decision to Louis. The Ali Norton third fight, you can very easily argue for Ken Norton, and there was definitely something fishy going on there. And I don't know what it was, but he didn't deserve. Ali did not deserve that decision. It was at best a draw. That's the one where
I think he was crying after the fight. I think.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, Norton's last great stand, and again, thank God for YouTube, because seriously, especially when sometimes today's boxing isn't that great to watch, and you really want to see a great fight. They have so many complete fights on YouTube, and Ken Norton's last great performance was in '78. It was after Ali, or maybe it was '79, but it was after Ali gave up the WBC belt to fight Spinks in the rematch. So for the vacant WBC title, it was Ken Norton and Larry Holmes, and it was 15 rounds.
Right.
And that is one of the best all-action fights that literally, in the last round, both guys are, swinging for the fences and trying to knock the other guy out. And Larry won the fight, but Ken Norton barely lost that fight. And that was the last great performance of Ken Norton. He was never the same after that. And, as I was telling you off the air, when Jerry Cooney was up and coming, he fought Norton. And he literally, that's another first or second round knockout. He literally rearranges Norton's face. I mean, his jaw's going one way, his nose is going the other way. He has this stunned, wide-eyed look in his eyes. Yeah, it was good that Ken went to acting at that point. So he came to The Score in the 90s when he had a book. And I talked to him because in his later years, his speech was slurred, but it wasn't from boxing.
Right.
He was in a terrible car accident. You know about that?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was.
I remember the slurred speech, but I just don't remember about the car accident.
Well, and honestly, I thought he was going to tear my head off because I wanted him to tell the story, and I said, Ken, people may notice, because he also, as an active fighter, was an excellent commentator, and there's a lot of. It might have been the Frazier Foreman fight, but I know there are a lot of fights with Cosell where Ken Norton is the color man, the analyst with the play-by-play guy. You can't say that these days, but you know what I'm saying when I say color man. That's what I don't mean the bad way. But
no, I remember the slurred speech, and everybody just assumed it was some boxing.
Right, and so I was telling him that, and he started giving me this dirty look, and I'm like, but Ken, I know better. I know your story. Would you mind sharing it on the air? And then he softened up, and he said, yeah, I was those canyon roads, as you know, someone who used to live in L.A., those winding canyon roads and everything. He went off one of the canyons and had very serious, not only body trauma, but head trauma as well. He had to relearn to speak, and he had to relearn to walk and everything. And Junior, because of the fact that he was an NFL player and knew all about conditioning and stuff, he really helped his father, get back on his feet, literally. And I said, and I go, Ken, that's your greatest victory. I said, to come back from something like that and be as capable as you are today, I said, people need to know that. And maybe because it was in the book, and that's kind of one of the big parts of the book, but I'm like, that's an incredible thing, man. And then he was nice to me, and then he knew I was on his side.
I don't think you mention him too much nowadays. I mean, I was watching, in the documentary, I'm thinking, these guys are giving each other a world-class beat.
Yes.
They're going back and forth. And Norton's holding his own with Ali in his prime.
Yeah.
I mean, Ali was, it was when Ali was went down to 220. I mean, he would fluctuate between 220 and 240. But when he was the second Norton fight, he really took it serious.
Absolutely.
He even said he didn't take it seriously the first fight. He was in the best shape of his life for the second Norton fight.
Well, he had to prove himself.
He was exchanging and blow for blow, man. They were going back and forth.
Oh no, it's a great fight.
And he heard him a couple. He heard Ali more than a couple of times.
The first two Norton fights are incredible to watch because they're so competitive and stuff. Another great one. It's not a heavyweight fight, but again, another ABC fight that you can find on YouTube. Sugar Ray Leonard against Wilfred Benitez, and that's when Leonard first won the welterweight title, and that's another razor thin decision. That for a couple punches and a couple rounds, you could have given it to Benitez, and that's such a great fight to watch as well. And what I was going to say, because as far as people not talking about Norton, how many? This shows you that where boxing is in the zeitgeist and in people's minds these days, and even thinking about back then. No, you're right. All they think about is Ali, Frazier, and Foreman. I don't think Larry Holmes gets mentioned unless you're really a hardcore sports fan. And you know about Larry and stuff.
Well, and also everybody also talks a lot about Sugar Ray, but they don't. They kind of skate over, and I guess rightfully so because he wasn't nearly as prolific. But when you talk about Tommy Hearns,
sure,
the Tommy Hearns Marvin Hagler fight.
Well, and Hagler as well. How about Hagler?
It was like it was choreographed for a movie.
Yes,
these guys literally stood in the ring and beat the. They beat the crap out of each other for what was it? What did it go? 3 rounds?
3 rounds.
I can't even remember what it went.
3 rounds.
3 rounds. These guys just stood there. They stood in the middle of the ring and just beat the crap out of each other for 3 rounds.
And right before they stopped the fight, and because Hagler had knocked Hearns out, Hearns had opened a massive cut on Hagler's face. And right before the knockout, the ref stops the action and has the doctor look at Hagler's face to say, "Can Hagler continue?" So I mean, Tommy was moving up in weight, but he was still a devastating puncher, still a slashing puncher, obviously. And that's one of the great all action, less than 3 rounds, but what an amazing thing while it lasted. I was working in Bloomington, Illinois, and doing a music show, and we had the old Newswire teletype cranking out the news, and they would give us round by round descriptions, and that's how I followed the fight. I wasn't able to watch it. It was on closed circuit or cable, pay-per-view back then. Actually, it's pre-paper, what they called pay-per-view. It was like you said, closed circuit. You either had to go to a theater, or if you had satellite, you could get it. Yeah, it was crazy. No, I remember it well.
Some of the bars had it.
Sure,
but I mostly remember the theaters. I mean, I think didn't your dad have some of that at his bar or no?
No, because it was expensive to do it. I mean, you really whatever your maximum capacity was to get a license to show that and everything. I don't know how much it cost in the 70s or 80s, but in the 90s, it was like $10,000. You had to put up $10,000, And that's why, they would have a charge at the door for people to come in and watch the fight. And also, they usually have a good deal on beers, so they would make their money. And the bars usually did fine. I don't even know what it costs these days. I went to
I saw Michael Spinks, Mike Tyson at the Park West.
I'm sorry.
And it was and I got in the true story. I got up to use the bathroom.
Oh no!
During the introduction, I got up to use the job because I thought I'm never going to be able to get in again, so I better go now. So we sat down. It was tables, and they hit you for the cover charge,
right?
And all the drink, And I got up to use the job, and I hear everybody screaming. And I thought it was the introduction. And I come out, and he's laying there with that overhead shot of his eyes, glassed over.
Yep.
And Tyson's got his hands out, going, I don't know what the hell just happened, And he's hugging his trainer. And I'm going, that's it. I think I paid $60.
Oh, sure.
That was it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I had pay-per-view through my cable company. I was down at school. I was still in college. And a couple friends came from Chicago to watch the fight. They drove 2.5 hours for 90 seconds. And also the rest of
I don't even think Spinks wanted to fight him. I mean,
no, definitely not.
During the introduction, during the introduction, he had a look on his face like he was going to the slaughter.
Yep.
Like he didn't even want to be there.
Yes, well,
and I thought, if anything, I thought Michael Spinks could take a punch. So I thought, Tyson's not going to get to him too early. And then I remember it was the same thing early on TV days. Remember on TV?
Yes, on TV was a pay-per-view premium.
Channel 44.
Yep.
Yeah. So we somehow talked my old man into the Great White Hulk.
Jerry Cooney.
Fighting Larry Holmes.
Yep.
Jerry Cooney, fighting Larry Holmes.
Oh, yeah, I watched it on TV.
And they could downplay it as much as they want now, but that would make a great clip in the sense of they turned that into the race fight of the century. I mean, they played up the whole Irish 100%. Angle of him.
100%.
And Larry Holmes. I mean, they pulled out all the stops to make that like the fight of. They were trying to turn it into Joe Louis, Max Schmeling. I swear to God.
You're right.
And everybody's lining up, and I'm like, because Larry Holmes. I mean, he's unfortunate in the sense that he came in an era where who's ever going to outshine Ali? I mean, forget it. No one's ever going to remember.
That's right.
Because Larry Holmes was just not. He was a soup can compared to Ali when he did interviews, and I guess he did really well for himself financially. He set himself up good. He didn't piss away all his money. But nobody ever remembers Larry Holmes. When you're talking about great heavyweights, I'm sorry. I mean, you may because you know him better in terms of, but he doesn't come up in the top 10. I mean, does he?
Well,
would you put him in the top 10 or no?
Well, that's the irony because fight fans know he's definitely in the top 10. He might be in the top. You could make an argument for the top 5 because he cleaned out the division. He had so many title defenses. It wasn't until Michael Spinks, and I mean he almost beat Marciano's undefeated record. He was 48-0 when he went and fought Michael Spinks.
Yeah,
and he lost the 2 fights.
I just think he wasn't sexy enough.
Right.
For the fight. That's he was a victim of his own. I mean, good fight. I mean, I don't think
great
anybody. Everybody was just kind of like, well, then beat the guy.
Well,
if you got a problem with him, why doesn't somebody beat him? And nobody could beat the guy.
That's exactly right. And
he came after an era where even when they brought Ali back, to fight him, and you were kind of like, I think he needed the money, or I forget what it was, but even Larry Holmes was kind of like, this shouldn't happen because Ali was not the guy he was.
Heartbreaking, and also, boy,
that Larry Holmes fight. Yeah, that was the one where Cosell kind of went off, didn't he? I mean, on ABC, I remember, didn't he? In his commentary, he's like, "This is a disgrace. This shouldn't be happening. They should stop this." And
you saw how slow Ali was, both not only in the ring but also speaking and things. I mean, no, he was damaged.
No, but do you remember that when Cosell went off during the fight?
Probably. I don't.
Check it out.
I know it's on that documentary. Yeah, it's
towards the end of the fight. Cosell really is kind of he's stating what everybody's thinking.
Well,
that this is a disgrace.
What I do remember,
they need to stop this.
What I do remember is Larry Holmes would throw 2 punches and connect, and look at the referee like, how many more punches do I have to land? What are you waiting for? Richard Christmas was that referee. I remember his name very well.
Yeah,
and No, and of course the very sad moment, and they show it in both the documentary and then also the other great documentary boxing film, Champions Forever, where it's the 10th. They stopped it at either I'm assuming the end of the 10th round or the beginning of the 10th round. But I know Dundee, literally, you can hear him, and he's like, all right, that's it, ball game's over, and he's waving over the referee. And Bundini Brown is like, no, you got to let him fight, And Angelo goes, fuck you. I'm stopping this. He goes, that's it. He goes, I'm the chief second. He's like, don't listen to Bundini. I'm the chief second. I'm stopping this fight. And seriously, you hear it all, and it's very dramatic and very sincere because, Angelo loved Ali, and he knew what was happening.
Yeah.
And
then I didn't realize he was on the other side before Ali hired him, right? I mean, one of the early fights they show in the documentary, Dundee was the trainer of the other fighter.
I didn't know that either. I didn't realize that. No, I had no idea.
Yeah, it was one of the guys he fought. Yeah, watch it early on. Dundee was the trainer of the other fighter.
Crazy.
And then they show him his next fight. They show him with Ali. And I was like, oh, he must have thought, hey, this guy's a good trainer. Let me just grab him.
Man, Angelo, that guy, Angelo had so many great stories. And I had the pleasure of hanging out with him a handful of times in the 90s. And he was such a great guy. And literally he would come.
I would pay to do, to hang out with that guy.
Oh, it was amazing.
I only remember him. You see him in Cinderella Man. He's the trainer, and you don't even recognize him because he's so old and he doesn't have any hair. But I remember the guy with the glasses, and he was always in Ali's corner, and he was the guy. And because that was Guinea Pride when in the 70s, because that was always. He was the brains behind Ali. If you listen to the Italians, Ali couldn't do it without an Italian trainer, is what they would tell you. That's literally what they would say around the dinner table at my house, John. It was like, well, look at Ali, but you see who he goes to when he needs a trainer, right? He goes and gets an Italian to teach him how to fight. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. I'm sure Ali wouldn't have done anything without an Italian trainer.
Two other great Italian trainers for Marvin Hagler, Goody and Pat Petronelli. And they managed Marvin and they trained him, and I believe Pat was the
it was Tyson's guy, his first guy. Was his mentor.
Oh, Customato, of course.
Customato, yeah. So where was these big heavyweights be, John, without the Italians, in their corner?
Good stuff, Sal. You're
telling them to hit the one in the middle.
That's right, for Rocky IV. Hit the one in the middle.
I'm seeing three of them. He's like, hit the one in the middle. Yeah.
Well, Dundee told me the great story that one of his fighters was Willie Pastrano. And Willie Pastrano was a good middleweight and light heavyweight, and he had the light heavyweight title. And he fought, do you remember this great Puerto Rican fighter, Jose Torres?
Sure.
So Torres took the title from Pastrano. And I forget if they were fighting in New York or in Vegas. I think New York. And Torres is just beating the hell out of Pastrano. Pastrano's a great fighter, but he's near the end.
Yeah.
So the referee comes in the corner in between rounds, and he's sizing up Pastrano, and he gives him the usual questions about, all right, is this guy out on his feet or is he still lucid? And he goes, what's your name? He goes, Willie Pastrano. He goes, where are you? New York City. He goes, what's happening? He goes, I'm getting the shit kicked out of me by Jose Torres. And the referee laughed and said, okay, you can keep going. But he stopped at the next one. But so
who was the guy? God, you probably won't remember because I don't even remember the guy's name. One of the grossest fights I ever seen was Tommy Hearns fought this guy from Africa, South African fighter, I think it was, and he practically knocked the nose off of his face. It was the grossest thing I've ever.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't think it was a South African opponent.
It was every once in a while in boxing you'll see some. They use. It was almost like his nose was disconnected from his face.
Oh, well, then maybe I'm thinking of a different one because I'm thinking of when Iran Barkley fought Tommy Hearns.
That was it.
And he puffed up his whole face. Yeah, he puffed up. It was disgusting. Right. You're right. His eyes were all puffed up. His nose was all. It was. Yeah, you're right. It's one of the worst beatings I ever saw, and especially a guy like Tommy Hearns, who was thought was still probably everyone thought, oh, he's still got enough to beat Iran Barkley. Clearly not. No, Iran. Hey, and now again, styles make fights. So Hearns had all that trouble with Iran Barkley. Meanwhile, Roberto Duran's last great victory was beating Iran Barkley. around that same era, like within a year or two of that fight. That's what set up.
That's one of the ones that I saw.
Sure.
When you watch footage, like on YouTube, same thing. You watch footage of Roberto Duran sparring. It's like that, where you're like, my God, this guy was. When they show the footage of him as a young Roberto Duran in their sparring, you're like, my God, that guy was unbelievable.
Yeah, there's a guy now, and I know my listeners know who I'm talking about. A Russian, Vasily Lomachenko. He reminds me very much of a young Duran. He's very, very fast. A great.
I think everybody remembers. I think unfortunately everybody remembers the No Mas.
Sure.
And they kind of forget, what a great fighter that guy
was. Oh my God! And that was 8 years after he had already proved himself as a lightweight and was dominating the lightweight division. That's why he went up to fight Leonard. Was he cleaned out the 135 division and totally didn't even. I forget how many junior welterweight fights he might have had before fighting Leonard at 147. But no, and again, I was going to say the Barkley win that Duran had. That's what set up the third Leonard Duran fight because they both had wins, and it's like, all right, let's have the rubber match, which was ridiculous. Leonard obviously beat him. But it's funny you mentioned the Cooney Holmes fight. There's an ESPN 30 for 30 about that fight and about how racist.
Okay, yeah, I remember it was a joke. I mean, in the sense of they really tried to make this guy out to be he was Rocky Marciano.
Well, he was a great amateur, and he was an up and coming contender. That was He knocked out Dwayne Bobbitt. He knocked out Ken Norton. I mean, again, Cooney was on the rise, and he was beating all the right guys and knocking them out. But he was babied in the ring. That was, I think, honestly, Cooney's biggest problem. If he had a cold that day, his Victor Valle, another Italian, he would Valle Valle. He would tell him, no, it's all right, Jerry, you can relax, and it's like you're babying the guy. Tom Hauser, who wrote an incredible Ali biography. The first boxing book he wrote was called The Black Lights, and he was going to do a whole thing on Cooney, but he ended up also focusing on Billy Costello, who was a great 140-pound fighter. And as he covered Cooney, he realized, he's like, the guy gets babied all the time. Tail's wagging the dog.
I mean, because it was much, obviously much different. But when you look at I've always was fascinated with Jack Johnson. Just from the footage and the story, and but now, just clearly, head and shoulders above everybody else, probably for the whole century, or no, or it was just apples and oranges.
Well, I think for
the guy
for
in
that
his
era,
prime looked like, yeah. I mean, is it? I know it's unfair to compare, but if you were going to put him in the ring with an Ali or a Tyson or unfair, impossible to gauge it, or was the guy just forget it? He was the Babe Ruth, or was he kind of?
Well, you see, baseball.
You got to take it in.
Baseball's easier because everyone's it's still hitting the ball, and can you hit it out of the park and everything. But I do think boxing styles did change because literally Johnson was 5 or 10 years past Jim Corbett, the first gloved heavyweight champion. And, Corbett beat Sullivan, and Sullivan was the last bare-knuckle heavyweight champion. So I do think the fighters of the early 1900s up until the 20s, there was a certain style of fighting. And then Dempsey, the same thing. I think, he brought a more modern he adapted as he got older. Because he started in the teens. And then, the 20s were his era. And Tunney, of course. And then, I think, I think it's easier to compare, like, the fighters of the 30s to the modern day. But I also think they were built to last. And certainly Johnson was, because Johnson was fighting not only 15-round fights, but, 20-round fights, 30-round fights. He was from that era. Right. You fought until you could. Right. And again, before the Marcus of Queensberry rules, you fought until you couldn't fight anymore. So, even Sullivan and Corbett and stuff had fights that went into the 70th round. But again, the rules were different. So, it's hard to say, but I do think he deserves, if you want an all-century great fighters, I think Jack Johnson is in the team photo and everything. It's interesting,
Okay.
I feel that way about.
Well, I don't know. There's some things you could say. You could say that about baseball, but baseball's harder because the ball changed.
True.
The rules changed a little. The height of the mound.
Yep.
and they weren't clearly as but a guy throwing a fastball is still a guy throwing a fastball, but you could do different things to the baseball. But with fighters, when you look at a guy like Jack Johnson, a guy who would fight 30 rounds without any gloves, and you think if you gave him modern training or whatever, or you trained him normally and you let him fight every 2 months. Yeah. What did they fight? 2-3 times a year. I mean, nowadays, or
if you're lucky.
Ali was a little more in the 70s. I think they fought every 2 months. Or something like that.
Well, after he lost to Frazier, he wanted to build back his legitimacy to fight for the title again, and he went on a world tour, and he fought Richard Dunn and Jurgen Blin and
well, it's just coming from being from Chicago. He's buried right over on Irving and Clark over near Wrigley.
Johnson, yes,
Jack Johnson,
yeah,
and it was just I was always fascinated with. Ken Burns did a great documentary on him.
Yes, it did,
and it's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
Plus, obviously for obvious reasons, this guy couldn't fight in a lot of places because of the racism and because they're worried about rioting.
Yep.
They put him against a white guy, and he was destroying these guys. It wasn't even. It was almost like we said about Larry Holmes. There was nobody who could beat this guy.
They were not only afraid of him fighting in town. They were afraid of riots breaking out when they showed the film of him beating Jim Jeffries. I mean, it was that bad. It was. I mean, it was horrible, and it was unfortunate because I do think you're right. If he had come in a later decade, he would have been more appreciated. But then again, he was, as opposed to Joe Louis, who would, kind of follow his management's advice in terms of be humble, don't be boastful and everything, be as polite as you could be and all this, and it was because of Jack Johnson's, not arrogance, but just, hey, I'm the best man here. And it's like, well, yeah, he is.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to, it almost comes with the territory. If you're going to be a heavyweight boxer and you make your living beating the crap out of people, I mean, there has to be a certain level of arrogance there for you to do what you're going to do. But, Joe Louis was famous for courting the starlets in Hollywood.
Oh yeah,
Sonia Henning and a lot of
that's right.
That's right. Crazy about Joe Louis, but they had to keep all that quiet.
Absolutely.
My God, if that got out in the newsreel or the news footage that Jack Warner was ready to kill himself, because if it was found out that any of his starlets were with Joe Louis, it's like forget it. They were ready. I mean, it was the same thing if you were gay. You had to squash the idea that anybody was gay in Hollywood for the same reason.
Sure.
I mean, it was just forget it. It was the PR people had to put the kibosh on all that. But Jack Johnson, to me, when you talk about fighting, it just always seems like it's almost like the Negro League baseball. It's
right.
Always this giant question mark.
Right.
And I've always wondered, it's unfair to go, hey, what would this guy be if he fought today, kind of thing. But it's when you see pictures, you go, well, for obvious reasons, I think he can hold his own because the guy was a beast. I mean, you look at pictures and you go, my God, the guy was a monster.
And he was physically, he was a bigger heavyweight that, from a weight standpoint, would stack up with modern heavyweights because he came from, Dempsey was a heavyweight champion at 180 pounds. Jack Johnson was a 200-pound heavyweight. And it's, so no, you're right. You're right about that. And it's tough to say, but
did those two ever fight or no? Did Johnson ever fight Dempsey or
no? They were two. Johnson had Johnson lost to the man that Dempsey won the title from, and now I'm blanking on his name. Shame on me. Everyone's listening right now, screaming it at the thing. Willard. Jess Willard.
No?
Jess Willard was the champion in between them. Pardon me? Was
he at the end of his career or no?
Yeah. Well, and after that, and also for all the trouble that was happening to him, he had a couple title defenses overseas because it was easier to make fights than do it in the States. So yeah, a lot of people felt like he threw the fight against Willard because he's on his back, but he had his arms crossed and he's got over his eyes to block out the sun while he's being counted out. So maybe he could have gotten up. Who knows? But Jess Willard was 240 pounds and over 6 feet tall, and he was a giant for his time. They called him he was a Potawatomi Indian, and they called him the Potawatomi Giant. But yeah, so they weren't.
Right.
But they did have a couple mutual opponents, Johnson and Dempsey, and I can't remember offhand. I'm reasonably certain about that. But Yeah, it would have been interesting to see, and I think Johnson would have beaten Dempsey, frankly, because I think he was so big, and I bet he could have taken as great of a puncher as Jack was. I bet he could have taken Jack's punches.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just always thought it was fascinating because it's just the guy was just larger than life.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, absolutely. And at a time,
he was almost like the prototype for Ali.
Absolutely, no question about it. Well, did you see? You've seen the movie The Great White Hope, haven't you, with James Earl Jones?
Yeah.
And when it was on, it was a play before it was a movie. And right. James Earl Jones would say Ali would come to the performances, and the character that was based on Johnson would scream, "Here I is," and say it, right. That was what he'd say, and Ali would repeat it every time he saw James Earl Jones, and be like, "Yeah, that's like I get it." And also Ali's big influence was, of all people, Gorgeous George from wrestling.
Oh yeah,
which is hilarious.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I can remember, Adonis, Gorgeous George,
Sure.
and from Bob Loose Wrestling at the amphitheater
in Chicago. Absolutely, man. Haystacks Calhoun.
Yeah.
And Superfly Snooker.
Yeah, I just remember, all the local, Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher, and
yep.
And my father used to always like to laugh because he's like, he thought they were all a bunch of drunks, ex-football players.
Yukon Moose Cholak.
Yukon Moose. Oh my God, Baron von Raschke was the best.
Baron von Raschke, absolutely.
He literally would come out with the swastika on his pants.
That's right.
Back in the day.
That's right.
And then right before he beat the guy, he would goose step around the ring.
That's right.
When he beat a guy.
He did.
Yeah, doing the Heil Hitler. He would have his hand up and he would walk, and this was on television. He would do
absolutely.
This. I mean, can you? I mean, it's like, and it was just like they thought it was part of his act.
Well, this is the era of Hogan's Heroes, so there were Nazis on primetime TV all the time. So yeah, you're right, man. No,
but
it wasn't.
Every wrestler I've ever seen in my life, John, the one with the worst cauliflower ears I've ever seen in my life was Baron von Raschke. Oh my God, this guy had ears you couldn't believe what this guy's ears looked like. I mean, it was like they were like. It was gross just to look at his ears. They were that bad.
That's fantastic. And Ali would show up a lot of times at the amphitheater and play around with Gorilla Monsoon. There's great photos of Ali and Andre the Giant or Gorilla Monsoon and all that stuff because Ali was living in Chicago when he wasn't, when he was in between fights. He was here. And
right.
No, he loved, I mean, that's, seriously, man, again, it on the one hand, it's fun to reminisce, but it also breaks my heart because this really was when boxing was really a part of the culture, and everybody knew what was going on. And really, I especially, growing up here in Chicago, we felt like we were in the center of the action because we had the heavyweight champion living in our city.
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
No, it was. I remember, and then Ernie Ladd. I mean, remember Ernie Ladd was the biggest human being I'd ever seen in my life.
Another wrestler,
as a wrestler. Yeah,
I don't remember Ernie Ladd, but I like it.
Ernie Ladd, I think he was an ex-football player. Sailor Art Thomas. I mean, It was like these guys were like, they were, but Moose Cholak was just a big fat guy. But then when you saw, Ernie Ladd and Sailor Art Thomas and the Lanza brothers, Blackjack Lanza, and the other guy would always go up against the Bruiser and the Crusher.
Bruiser and the Crusher. Crusher was from Milwaukee.
But then you had the crazy Indians. You had Wahoo McDaniels.
Yes. Chief
Strongbow. Did the tomahawk chop. Oh, they would play into every stereotype they could possibly play into. Yes. They had it out there.
Absolutely.
They had it. I mean, if he was an Indian, he came out with a full headdress.
Absolutely.
And he would do the war game. Before he would beat the guy, he would do a war game.
Sure.
And they would put the Cowboys against the Indians.
That's right.
It was like as a kid, you were like, "This is perfect."
Well, it was.
You died and went
characters. I mean, it was. Yeah. I mean, playing characters and stuff. Absolutely, man. You're killing me, Sal. This is great.
Superstar Billy Graham.
Of course.
He had the psychedelic,
the tie-dye.
But Adonis was my favorite. He would come out and he had the wig and he had the big robe with the hearts on it.
That's hilarious.
And he would play it like he was Liberace. He was Adonis.
Yes.
And he would fix his hair. And I mean, somehow we talked my old man to take us to the amphitheater. And you went, and it was like, these guys had to rip each other's throat out, to make a living. I mean, it was all I remember was it was smoke, cigarette smoke, cigar smoke. Everybody threw stuff at the guy. I mean, pop. Everything was just, they expected to get just like showered with junk. People would throw things. And it was like, I'm telling you, man, it was like a freak show. They treated these guys like they were less than human.
I agree, man.
What I remember.
I got to know Bobby the Brain Heenan in the 90s because we would have he grew up around Chicago, so he used to come back to the city all the time. And we would talk about it, and he would tell me about doing wrestling at carnival shows and literally in between matches to shower. He had to use a garden hose to kind of cool off and stuff, and it was just horrible. And all the different injuries he got over the years. Bobby was amazing and really took us inside in terms of, this is what, before everything exploded with cable and wrestling, this is back, in the barnstorming days of the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. And it sounded horrible.
Yeah.
And same with Hulk Hogan. He came in studio, and he told us some stories as well. Crazy stuff, man. And, I used to go, there's a Chicago bar, I know you know it, restaurant, Miller's Pub. And that's where all the wrestlers hung out. And my dad's restaurant was right down the street. And when his place was a commuter restaurant, it would close by early dinner. It would close by 8 o'clock at night. And before we'd come home, he'd go, let's go to Miller's and see if any of the wrestlers are there. I'm like, okay. And it was great. They had all the photos of the wrestlers on the walls. They took them all down. It's such a shame. They had so many great celebrity photos in Miller's, and they remodeled.
I used to work at the Palmer House right there.
Yes.
When I got out of college, I was a bartender there.
Oh wow, man!
And the Japanese wanted to buy it, and they wouldn't sell it to them. And what destroyed the Palmer House and what destroyed a lot of Wabash was that high rise that they put, that office building they put across the street from Miller's.
Oh sure,
and the Palmer House.
Yes.
Because it blocked the view of the lake.
That's right.
And the Palmer House always had this great view of the lake.
Wow.
And it wiped out a whole block of Wabash, which was stuff like, I remember going down there. It was awesome. You had pawn shops and taverns and bars and music stores and art stores and jewelers. And it was where you went down there, and it was under the L, and it really had the feel of the city. And when they wouldn't sell the Palmer House to the Japanese, they bought the lot across the street and built the office building.
Wow, because I know that, but
they said that.
I was going to say that's where
the guy I worked with, the old guy I worked with at the Palmer House, said that because the pump room was in there, and they used to. That place was the go. And that whole little area where your dad's place was, and Miller's and the Palmer House was. That was, and then you had the Chez Paul.
Yes,
and you had the what was the one over on Fairbanks Court was the Chez Paris, and you had that was the center of Chicago back before the airplane, because everybody used to go downtown because of the train.
Absolutely, and the bus,
4 train stations,
and Randolph on Randolph.
That's right, Randolph and Wabash. You had the Greyhound bus
exactly.
Right there.
Michael Beschloss, the historian, has this beautiful. He posted it on Twitter. This beautiful black and white picture of the Greyhound bus station. And now it's a parking lot. Well, was the bus station is now a parking lot. Yeah. And I would always walk there on my way to the L to take the train home. So I'm like walking, and it was this great picture.
Randolph. The good thing about Randolph is that in certain movies, like if you watch the Blues Brothers, there's a great shot of them going west.
Yep.
Down Randolph, and all the stuff that's there in that shot is gone.
Yep.
The Oriental Theater, and there's about 5 theaters that are there that are they've saved a few of them, and they've refurbished the Oriental, made it into for Broadway plays and stuff like that. But you see the bus terminal, you see about 5 theaters. And when I used to work down there, I used to work in advertising on Wacker, One East Wacker, which was Wacker and State.
Okay.
Every once in a while, I'd play hooky and I'd go to one of the theaters. But John, you remember? I don't know if you remember or not. In the '80s, those theaters became toilets.
Yes,
they were just rat infested.
Oh yeah,
and the seats were burnt out, and they destroyed those theaters.
They sure did.
They were just. You would sit in there and you literally would see the rats running around. You could hear the popcorn buckets moving on this under.
Absolutely.
You feel them rub against your feet when they ran by.
Absolutely, man. Well, that's why when they restored the, I forget what the Oriental's name is. They did change it, obviously, because they feel it's probably too sensitive to call it Oriental anymore. But also the Chicago Theater too. These are $1 million renovations to get rid of all the rats and really bring them back to
the State Lake where Channel 7 was the State Lake.
That's right.
You remember the State Lake Theater was right there.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then I was telling my wife, I said, when my mother took us downtown to see You Only Live Twice.
Yes.
Sure. When you came up, John, from under the street on State, okay, that Walgreens has always been on the corner there, right at Randolph and State. It's still there now. They tore down the building and actually put another Walgreens there. But the old Walgreens was there. But do you remember next to it, they had the Marlboro, or it was a Winston sign with the guy holding a cigarette with the real smoke coming out of his mouth.
Absolutely. I remember from New Year's Eve every year they would show that sign. Go on.
Yeah. And I told my wife, I said, when I was a kid and we came down there and you saw that, it was like Blade Runner. You thought you died and went to heaven. You never see anything like it in your life.
Well, it was exciting. The city was exciting.
Oh, my God. Because you had to go downtown to go to the show in those days. They didn't have the multiplexes. Nope. But in short order, by the 80s, you couldn't set foot in one of those, John. They were all kung fu movies.
Right.
It was just X-rated, but more than that, they were filthy. They were toilets, man. I mean, it was dangerous to go in those places.
100%, man. No, I remember well. You're killing me, Sal. This is good. All right. Well, we're I was going to say, if you want, we can wrap up as far as
that's one of those things where I'm always. Because I used to love to walk down Wabash.
Sure.
They had always. My brother used to work at Frank's Drum Shop on Wabash.
Okay.
And I used to love to go to the art stores, the pawn shops and the art stores and the guitar stores. And I can't even. It's so different now, John, that I can't even remember where things were.
I hear you,
I don't remember what used to be there.
Yeah.
Because they've made it look so different. Like what's where your dad's bar was?
21 South Wabash. It's a parking lot now.
It's a park. See what I mean?
Yes.
You can't even go down there and go, the building used to be here. Or, this is where it was.
The building you described across from the Palmer House, I believe that's that silver building on the corner, right, where they park?
Yeah.
All right, so we used to park there. We'd go across the street. Crocs and Brentano's bookstore was right there.
Oh, yeah.
And then a couple further doors down was my dad, and he was at 21 South Wabash. And it was right there on Jewelers Row. I mean, Wabash is famous for listeners who don't know Chicago, for all like great.
Now wait a minute. Now were you down there? Where were you when the train went over on Lake in Wabash?
We were Wabash and Adams.
But I mean, were you down there? Did you go down there when that happened? Did your dad talk about it?
Oh, I don't know. No, I don't remember that. That I don't remember.
Remember in 77 when the CTA train, right where it makes the turn.
Holy cow!
At Wabash and Lake Street, it flipped over when it fell on the street.
Wow! Well, that was right by my dad. I mean, he wasn't that far away. Like I said, he was at Wabash and Adams, so it was a couple. Yeah, it was a couple blocks down, or a block or two. But yeah, that's crazy. Jeez. No, I started working for him in literally the summer of '78. That's when I started working for him.
My old man used to deliver bread down there. And he said he remembers when the train fell that a bunch of winos all ran and laid down under the train real fast because they wanted to get paid.
Jesus. Well, there was
back when you had winos. You remember when there were winos?
Well, I was going to say
they were just
my dad had next to him. He had a methadone clinic, so they'd get people getting off of heroin and stuff and taking methadone to get off of heroin. And they'd come in the apartment, and if my dad saw that they were stoned, he'd kick them out. He'd be like, "Get out of here! Get out of here! What? Get out of here!" And he had a good bark. He had a good scary bark.
My dad used to deliver at night. When they used to give him the key for the boxes. He opened the front door, not to get in the whole restaurant, just in the hallway, like the heat trap.
Well, they're even outside. I remember in the back they even had like wooden boxes for the bread that were locked and stuff like that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, but he had to carry a gun.
I believe
because
it.
He said down there at night, you never knew what you were going to run into. But the bigger problem was rats when he used to have to go down the alley. Yeah. So he'd have to go. He's like, it was no joke. I mean, he would literally jump out of the garbage. He would jump 6 feet into the air. Those rats.
Well, I'm sad to say that every now and then when I'm walking around downtown at night, you can see the rats. The rats are still there.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know comparatively how bad the problem is and stuff, but they're still there. You still see them. So.
Oh no, it's just. I mean, he used to every once in a while. If you in the summertime, if you really pissed him off, you would piss him off. He would take you on the route. You know, you would be like, "Oh, come on," and it was second shift. He'd start at 2, and you wouldn't get home until 2:00 in the afternoon. And you think it's a good idea till about 3:00, 3:30. You know, when you didn't. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And you're literally sleeping on the floor of the truck, John. You know, you're laying on the bread rack. You know, on the racks where they lay the bread. You're so tired. And he would be laughing his ass off, hitting every bump he could hit. You know, and you're bouncing. But I remember when you'd make a turn and you'd go down one of the alleys. As soon as the headlights hit the alley, you could just see them. I mean, like hundreds of them, like cockroaches running in the alley.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The rats. You know, I mean, scurrying to get out of the way. It was, and you were like, my God, this is anybody who thinks it's an urban legend. It's like drive down one of them alleys at like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Well, or we know from comic conventions when we go to the Javits Center. Weren't you the one who showed me the video of the floor of the Javits Center at night?
Yeah, oh no, the Javits is a toilet, and it's always been that way because they can never seem to get it right. And anytime they want to modernize it, it's so expensive and it's so hard to get it, you know, under budget.
Right.
Because there's a lot of moving parts in New York, a lot of different unions and a lot of powers that be.
Sure.
So when they were digging up, they call it the Hudson Yards area now. It's called Hudson Yards.
Right.
And they were digging up. They added the extension to the trains there.
That's right.
And one year when we were there, because it's right on the river, I mean, and it's bad anyway. It's Hell's Kitchen anyway. It's the old livery part of New York where they used to park the horses, and then the horse barns literally became where they would park the cabs.
Wow.
You see in Taxi Driver where he walks down. There's that scene where he's walking down 10th Avenue when he goes to the taxi barn. There was nothing over there, but that's where everybody would park their cars.
That's crazy.
So it was bad, especially at night. So anyway, they bought up all the real estate over there now. It's all big money. But when they were digging up to make the train yards, to make the subway extension, we had a booth. We used to have a booth at the Javits going back to when New York Comic Con started. But Comic Book Resources, back when there was Comic Book Resources, they used to do a thing. They would do a time lapse of the show to show how it would fill up and then empty and fill up. So anyway, one year they left it on overnight. They didn't turn it off. They left it on overnight. So I'm watching this thing, and you see at night just the rats running back and forth in the hall. And I mean a lot of rats.
Yeah, it is. It's like a horror movie.
I'm like, my God. You know, I mean, and this is, you were just there like 2 hours early.
Right.
And the next day when you went back to the hall, you were like, oh, my God.
You better wear 5 pairs of socks.
I'm looking before I put my hand under a table, that's for sure.
Absolutely, man. No, or you get an ankle bite or something like that. Yeah, you better, Yeah, no,
because there's tons of food on the floor.
Absolutely.
So they're just there.
Yep.
And then when you mention it to anybody that works there, they just kind of laugh at you. They're like, yeah, what's the big deal?
Right, well, because they've been living with it for decades. Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So I was like, no, this is not funny, man.
Good story, Sal. We've got off the subject, but that's all right. I'm going to wrap up the podcast and keep talking to you. So thank you very much for being on the podcast.
All right, John. Anytime.